paper, academic writing and composition, you will be having critical appreciation that might be from a poem or a prose passage, and writing the substance or a summary with a critical note. So these two uh, types of questions will be set, and they would be of equal value, that is 20 marks. And in the case of writing summary substance with a critical note, that would be 12 plus 8. So there would be 12 marks for writing the substance, and the critical note would carry 8 marks. But writing critical appreciation, that would be 20 marks. So there would not be any kind of division in that. Now, I have given one prose passage in your WhatsApp group. So we'll be looking at that a little later, but for the present moment, let us concentrate on how to write the critical appreciation of a prose passage. Now, as I told you about how to write the critical appreciation of a poem, writing the critical appreciation of a prose passage is a slightly different thing, because, as you know, there are quite a few differences between a poem and a prose passage, and we have to uh, write our critical appreciation accordingly. Now, I'll give you certain points which you may take down if you want. Now, a prose passage, of course, it would be it can be, as I was telling you, it can be from a kind of a, critical writing, uh, some critical writing on anything really, anything on literature, any genre literature, that is, it might be from uh, poems, or it can be on ancient Greek tragedies, on Shakespearean sonnets, Shakespearean plays, or on modern poetry, on Victorian poetry. So it might vary. Now, there are some, of course, rules which we would have to follow in order to write the critical appreciation of a prose passage. Now, the very first step, of course, that is you have to mention the type of the prose passage. Just as in the case of, for example, the case of a poem, you had to mention the type of uh, poem. For example, if you found that it had 14 lines, you would, of course, mention that uh, it was a sonnet. It is a sonnet. So, like that, or it's a lyrical piece of poetry. It is, or for that matter, if it is part of a larger poem, you can say that it's part of an ode, anything like that. So, likewise, in the case of a prose passage, you have to mention the type of the prose passage. So, whether it is a narrative, whether something is being narrated, something is being, uh, the writer is talking about something, or it is descriptive in nature. He is describing a particular scene, or he is describing something, or it is reflective, whether the writer is expressing his thoughts, his emotions, and he has presented a number of thought-provoking ideas in this particular passage. So you have to uh, mention that. And of course, reading the passage a number of times, that is mandatory, of course. Otherwise, you will find it difficult to understand. Though, of course, as I had told you, that in the case of a poem, sometimes it becomes difficult to understand the meaning, because if it is an Elizabethan sonnet, you might not be familiar with some of the words. Some of the words might be obsolete. Or if it is a modern poem, then there are some stylistic devices that might be used, which you might find difficult to follow. But the same applies for a prose passage, and we have to read the prose passage a number of times in order to understand the meaning. So whether it is reflective, that is, there are the writer here, whether he is reflecting, is thinking aloud like that, he is talking to us through this prose passage, and whether it is didactic, whether it is full of lessons or certain advice, or it is kind of a it deals with some historical material. Uh, the writer is describing something uh, that pertains to history. And as I told you, it might be from a literary piece of writing. So whether it has a kind of a character which pertains to any kind of prose, poetry, drama, and of course whether it is a philosophical piece of writing. So and when you read the passage, of course you will be able to understand that whether the writer is the theme of the passage, whether he is dealing with uh, something from a topic from science, for example, or he is dealing with something from religion, or he is dealing with a topic from mythology, for example. So you can understand this. If you read the passage, you will be able to understand this. So that has to be mentioned in the very first, you know, uh, first step is that. Secondly, of course, the intention of the writer. Just as you mentioned the intention of the poet in the case of a poem. So in the case of a prose passage, what is the writer trying to say? And in this connection, you have to talk about the theme of the passage, and that should not be long. You do not need to elaborate on that, of course, but you have to mention it in one or two sentences, not longer than that, because you have to write the critical appreciation, and that is quite a lengthy affair because you have to deal with so many different things. So the theme that has to be grasped. What is the prose passage on? And you have to write it in your own words. That goes without saying. In the third step, so you have now talked about the nature of the passage, and you have also you have mentioned the intention of the writer. So in the third step, you have to mention the tone or nature of the passage. So whether the writer has an argumentative tone, whether he is arguing, he wants to establish a certain point of view, and he is doing that by presenting a number of arguments, or whether it is an analytical passage, in the sense that it is the writer is here analyzing. He is taking up certain ideas. For example, he might be analyzing the poems of William Shakespeare, the sonnets, the French sonnets, for example. So he might be uh, taking up a number of sonnets together, which has this theme of time the passage of time and the permanence of you know poetic creation. So, and then you have to mention that, so that there is an analytical tone in this passage. And also, if the writer takes the help of illustrations in the sense of examples. So if he is if he's giving a number of examples, he takes up a certain passage, and in order to explain, in order to present his point of view, what he is doing is giving a number of examples, that is illustrations, and he's, in that sense, he's uh, trying to explain his point of view in that way. So you have to mention that if you find a number of examples comparing this with that, so that has to be kept in mind. Or the tone might be ironical. The tone might be ironical. So just as in the case of a poem, the tone might be ironical in this case also. And if you are able to sort of understand, if you are able to sort of get the meaning that the writer is, he might be talking of something in an ironical tone, uh, then of course you will have to mention that. Or he might be using uh, a very straightforward style, a simple style. In that case, you have to mention that also, that his style is straightforward and simple. So that is the third step that you have to mention. Now let us move on to the fourth step. And here, in the fourth step, of course, you will need to uh, sort of analyze briefly how the writer has presented his ideas in the different parts of the passage. So the prose passage might be, uh, you know, it might consist of more than one paragraph. So it might be of three paragraphs, or of course it can be of one paragraph, but it might be divided into a number of paragraphs. There might be short paragraphs, or there might be one long paragraph. So you have to mention how the thought process of the writer is developing, how the thought process is flowing in a sense. And in doing this, in trying to kind of explain this, you can take up certain phrases, certain words, just as we had done in the case of that poem uh, by Edward Thomas Edelstrop. As you would remember, we had taken up certain words and certain phrases also. So the same thing applies to a prose passage. So if you are impressed by certain particular phrases or certain words that he is using to sort of present his arguments, present his thoughts, then you have to mention those. You can mention in your critical comment. And the fifth step, of course, if you can sort of identify any figures of speech, for example, irony. This is not exactly, very easy to do in a prose passage. It is easier in a poem, because a poet, of course, uses a number of figures of speech, from irony, metaphor, simile, synecdoche, metonymy, personification, apostrophe, epigram. So there are so many figures of speech. So if you can find anything, then of course you will mention that. Lastly, that is the sixth step. Here comes the stylistic elements. The stylistic elements in the sense of how kind of the kind of style that the writer is employing. Is it a simple, straightforward style, or it is a very, kind of an obscure way that he's presenting his ideas? Uh, you as a reader, uh, can you grasp what he is saying uh, clearly or easily enough? Is it lucid enough? Are the ideas presented in a lucid and straightforward, simple way, or they are sort of the thought process is jumbled up, is jumping from one idea to another, is not maintaining the sequence? So that is another thing that we have to take note of. So these are, some of the ways in which we can analyze a prose passage. The 6 points that we have to keep in mind. Now, let us look at the prose passage that I have given you. Now, this is a prose passage from a particular literary critic. As you can understand, if you have read the passage, you will be able to understand. So please look at the prose passage that I have given you in your group, WhatsApp group, and I'm reading this. I'll be reading this first, and then we will try to analyze it. Uh, we'll see how we can analyze the prose passage. If you were asked to write the substance, then of course you will have to mention the gist of this passage in your own words. But since we are dealing with the critical appreciation of a prose passage, we are not going to write the substance. We are not going to attempt that, but directly we will proceed to uh, our sort of analysis. So let us read the prose passage. Now, this power of suggestion is one of the most mysterious properties of words. Everyone who has ever written a sentence must be conscious or half conscious of it. Words, English words, are full of echoes, of memories, of associations, naturally. They have been out and about, on people's lips, in their houses, in the streets, in the fields, for many centuries. And that is one of the chief difficulties in writing them today, that they are so stored with meanings, with memories, that they have contracted so many famous marriages. The splendid word incarnadine, for example, who can use it without remembering also multitudinous seas? In the old days, of course, when English was a new language, writers could invent new words and use them. Nowadays, it is easy enough to invent new words. They spring to the lips whenever we see a new sight or feel a new sensation. But we cannot use them because the language is old. You cannot use a brand new word in an old language because of the very obvious yet mysterious fact that a word is not a single and separate entity, but part of other words. It is not a word indeed until it is part of a sentence. Words belong to each other, although, of course, only a great writer knows that the word incarnadine belongs to multitudinous seas. So this is the prose passage, and as you can see that this is one paragraph. It consists of one paragraph. And before going into the analysis of this prose passage, I'd like to ask you just one question. The writer here has mentioned uh, two words. One is incarnadine, and the second is actually it's a phrase, multitudinous seas. So, can you tell me from which play these two words or phrase, this particular phrase and this word has been taken? So, uh, it is a famous play, and it is in your syllabus rather. So, you should be aware of it. What is the play from which this word or this particular phrase is taken? Can anyone tell me? Or okay, I'll tell you later on, since you do not seem to know. After we do the uh, analysis of this passage, you should have been able to tell me, because you are now in semester 4, and in semester 3, I think, yes, you did you have this play in your syllabus, or semester 4 syllabus? So let us look at how we can proceed with the critical appreciation of this play, or rather prose passage, sorry. Just trying to find out the, the syllabus that has been given. Now, where has that gone? Okay, let us first try to understand what the writer is saying here. Uh, it is clear that here the writer is talking about the power of suggestion of English words. So that is why he is saying that the power of suggestion is one of the most mysterious properties of words. Mysterious means a kind of a enigmatic uh, kind of a property. And he's saying that anyone who has ever written a sentence must be conscious or half conscious of it. So when we use words in a sentence, perhaps we are composing a passage, we are writing something in prose, and then a particular word comes up to our mind, and it would have particular association for us. So English words are full of echoes. Echoes meaning one particular word would in its turn give rise to in the mind of the writer another word or phrase, and certain memories would be coming back, and associations, by way of associations. So uh, one particular idea or one particular word would in its turn give rise to another idea or uh, another word. So the writer here is saying that these words have been sort of going around on people's lips everywhere, in the houses, outside, in the streets, in the fields for many centuries. So the English language has evolved from its earliest stage, that is Old English, then to Middle English, and finally to Modern English. And how it has evolved, that can be understood, the way our word has evolved. And uh, the word actually, each and every word, it is they are stored with certain meanings, with certain memories, and as it were, they have combined together. The writer now gives here an example. So he is giving us an example in order to prove his point. And what he is giving, what is the example? That is the word incarnadine. Now, he is saying that this word incarnadine was used by a particular writer, particular dramatist, and he had used this word in association with another phrase, that is multitudinous seas. And the moment this particular word incarnadine is pronounced, we read this word, we would be reminded, or naturally the phrase multitudinous seas would come in. That is by way of association. And he's saying that in the old days, in the earlier days, English was actually a new language. It was evolving, and therefore the writers, they had the advantage of creating new words. For example, you know that in the plays of Shakespeare, William Shakespeare has used, or he has evolved, certain words. In Milton's poetry also you find this. So in your first semester syllabus you had philology, and the influence of Shakespeare, the influence of John Milton, the influence of the Bible. So you read about all these things. These topics were there. So you know how a writer is able to influence or contribute to the development of a language. So the writer here, he is referring to this, that when the language is new, a writer can take certain liberties with it. He can evolve or create certain new words, use words in a different way, give new meanings to the words, or sort of invent new words. Nowadays, what has happened, words can be invented when someone perhaps feels a new sensation or sees something new. One might use novel expression, but uh, since the language is old, the English language has reached a kind of a stable situation. You cannot really incorporate certain new expressions, new words into it. So it is difficult to use those words in an old language. So a brand new word, a word which is a neologism, a kind of new coining, in an old language, of course, it cannot be used because it would not have the right kind of association or the power of suggestion. So it has to relate to other words. It cannot exist by itself. So it is a part of a sentence. each and every word is part of a sentence. So you cannot detach it from the sentence. So words as uh, at the end of this paragraph, the writer is saying that words belong to each other. Although, of course, only a great writer knows that the word incarnadine belongs to multitudinous seas. So, uh, of course, it would take the genius of William Shakespeare to use this word, to coin this word incarnadine and use it in association with multitudinous seas in the play Macbeth. So obviously, uh, there is a power of association, a power of suggestion, which the writer is talking about here in this prose passage, and he is also giving us this illustration. So uh, the basic idea is that no particular word can exist by itself, and uh, you can say that they have been used in many contexts over the years, over the centuries, and the usage has sort of, in a sense, developed. So the usage of words have developed, or it has evolved, and a new word would would not find its place in an old language, because words are meant to be part of a whole sentence. They cannot have a meaning on their own. So this is the idea of the passage, the power of suggestion, how one word would give rise to other ideas. The pronunciation or the writing of a particular word or phrase would give rise to the suggestions of other ideas or words. So this is the main idea in this passage. So after you have read the passage uh, more than once, you will understand the sort of, what the writer is talking about. Now, in order to write the critical appreciation or the critical, add your own critical comments, we can write like this. So I'll dictate to you and you can take this down. So make a new heading, critical appreciation of the prose passage. So we have to first mention, in the given prose passage, comma, uh, in the given prose passage, which is evidently written, by a literary critic, which is evidently written by a literary critic. Literary critic, of course, uh, as you know, that he is talking about this the prose passage, or he has been writing on the power of suggestion of English words, and comma after that, put a comma after that, written by a literary critic, deals with the immense suggestive powers, of English words, deals with the immense suggestive powers of English words. Full stop. The writer has brought to the notice, the writer has brought to the notice of his readers, the writer has brought to the notice of his readers the the evocative quality of the words. The evocative quality of the words. And he has given the example, the writer has brought to the notice of the readers the evocative quality of the words, and he has given the example of the word, the word within inverted commas, right, incarnadine, which combines to great effect, with, again, right within inverted commas, multitudinous seas, full stop, which combines to great effect with multitudinous seas. Make a new paragraph now and write, the writer further says that whenever whenever we see something new, or feel a new sensation, we see something new or feel a new sensation, we invent new words. To express our feelings. But this is not always the case. And often it is seen that the feelings are being expressed through old and traditional words. The feelings are being expressed through old and traditional words. So, but this is not always the case, and often it is seen that the feelings are being expressed through old and traditional words. Full stop. It seems really odd to think that every time we see or hear something new, we invent new words to express ourselves. So here the comment would be that the writer is saying that whenever we see something new or we feel something, feeling that is new, do we always coin or invent new words to describe our feelings? So that is a moot point, or that is subject to discussion. So that might not be always true. So that is the critical comment that we have provided. We invent new words to express ourselves. So it feels a bit odd. Now make another new paragraph and write, in fairness to the writer, it may be said that his final contention that words alone are not capable of giving any meaning to a sentence, is to a great extent true. we can see this, we can see this, we can see this in the works of great writers, in the works of great writers like William Shakespeare and Charles Dickens. William Shakespeare and Charles Dickens. Put a full stop, then write. We often come across particular words. We often come across particular words which can evoke. We often come across particular words which can evoke diverse feelings, which can evoke diverse feelings and emotions. Diverse feelings and emotions. And can perform the function of several words in a sentence, and can perform the function of several words in a sentence. Full stop. These are to be found in the famous plays of Shakespeare. These are to be found in the famous plays of Shakespeare, and the most graceful and memorable descriptions of Charles Dickens. Most graceful and memorable descriptions of Charles Dickens. Full stop. Make a new paragraph again and write down. Finally, it may be pointed out that though one may differ from the writer on some points, comma, it has to be owned, OWNED, that the writer, it has to be owned that the writer has expressed, it has to be owned that the writer has expressed an important characteristic. The writer has expressed an important characteristic of the English words and the English language as a whole, of the English words and the English language on the whole. Full stop. The passage is illustrative in nature. The passage is illustrative in nature, and the writer has given us, the passage is illustrative in nature, and the writer has given us examples from a famous play like Macbeth, You may underline the title of the play, Macbeth, or put it within single inverted commas, to present his viewpoint. Full stop. The diction is simple enough. That is the words that he has used, apart from, of course, the words that Shakespeare had used. The diction is simple enough, and the reader can follow his ideas, easily enough. So this is the how you should attempt to write uh, the critical appreciation of a prose passage, and we have to remember the 6 steps. Here, of course, the passage is written by a literary critic, and we have to mention that it is a literary piece of writing, and the tone or the way he is sort of giving us examples is also illustrative in nature, and he is presenting his ideas in a coherent way. So that is important, and how the language is not at all difficult to understand. The words that he has used, so those are not difficult to understand for the reader, and all these aspects we have to mention when we are talking about the uh, how to write the critical appreciation of a prose passage. So I will end the class here, and in our next class I will again give you another example from a poem. So if we can just uh, practice some of these writing the critical appreciation of poems and prose passages. One other class on how to write critical appreciation on a poem, and again one other class on how to write critical appreciation of a prose passage. So, uh, and I might also give you homework also. You can write on your own, you can at least try to write on your own. So, in that way, that would help you in a sense. So, let us stop here today. I hope you have understood or you have grasped the essential points how to write the critical appreciation of a prose passage.